What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be talking about movement in Fortnite Zero Build. I get asked a bunch to make like a movement guide sort of video, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. If you guys do enjoy this, find it helpful and informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below which aspect of movement you've been struggling with most. And I think the reason why a lot of people ask me to make this type of video is there's a lot of Zero Build players that come from Apex and come from Warzone. And with Warzone 1 and Apex, there's a very large movement skill gap with like slide canceling, bunny hopping, and then using those sorts of things in fights. In Fortnite, that's not really the case. There isn't that much of like a mechanical skill gap to the movement in this game. There's no slide canceling. There is bunny hopping, but it's like after gliding, and it's really not that big of a deal. The main skill with movement in Fortnite, I think, is just putting yourself in advantageous positions consistently over the course of a fight. There is a large degree of movement skill gap with building, but in Zero Build, that is the main thing you want to focus on. Just putting yourselves in the best spot as often as possible and just being annoying to fight, basically. This clip here will kind of show what I'm talking about, but using cover is super important. My aim is terrible in this clip, so don't pay attention to that. But just the way I'm playing off of cover in these fights is what you want to be doing. And this is kind of hard to explain or kind of hard to like point out, but it's just like it needs to be natural. Over the course of a fight, you need to be able to naturally, consistently like use cover and put yourself in advantageous positions without really focusing too much on it. Like it needs to be very natural, I think. That way you could still focus on aiming and you could still focus on like playing the fight appropriately. But if you are able to just seamlessly, naturally use cover and use right shoulder peaks as much as possible, I've talked about this countless times in like many videos on my channel, but the camera in Fortnite is off center. So if you peek from the right, you have to expose less of your character than if you're peeking from the left. So here's an example where I should be dead 100%, but the enemy player peeks from the left and I'm able to hit a bailout one pump shot, and it wouldn't have worked if they had taken a different angle or made a larger adjustment when pushing me, which we'll get to later on. And in the first clip I showed where I was fighting in Brutal, I was just consistently backing up into right shoulder peaks as I knew there were enemy players around me. And eventually we were able to get 2 right shoulder peak shots on somebody, and that kind of neutralized the damage deficit that we were at to the point where we could close that kill super easily. So while there isn't like slide canceling, there isn't bunny hopping, there's still a large degree of movement skill in terms of how you use cover, what type of angles and peaks you take, and just doing this naturally over the course of a fight just constantly. Another course or another aspect of movement skill in Fortnite, or pretty much any shooter, is kind of aiming with your movement. So if you move your character left to right or side to side, if you crouch, if you jump, all of these things move your crosshair. Like you don't need to touch your aiming stick at all, or your mouse if you're on keyboard, and just moving your character will move your aim. And you can use this to your advantage to make small adjustments, like especially for controller players. Strafe aiming, or making adjustments to your aim by moving your character, can be very, very helpful because it's hard to make those like very small minor adjustments with the analog sticks. And most shooters that I've ever played on controller that have aim assist, the aim assist seems to work better or be stronger or be more consistent when you are moving your character. And like I feel this in Fortnite. I do think like the aim assist is stronger if you're moving, and I know for a fact it is a thing in Call of Duty because it's been proven time and time again. And this is something that's going to like help you in so many different ways. So not only are you going to be strafing, which is going to make you inconvenient to hit, you also can use this to help benefit your aim and make those small adjustments. A lot of the people that have just very, very good consistent aim, I feel like it comes down to like centering, crosshair placement, and just like strafe aiming to make those small adjustments. Like people who do those 3 things very well, especially on controller, typically have very good aim and just very consistent aim. So not only do you make yourself a harder target to hit, your aim gets better, and it just makes everything feel more consistent, I think. Like at its core, the way you want to think about movement in this game in terms of a fight, like obviously from point A to point B is different, but at its core, movement in a fight just comes down to being inconvenient to hit. Use cover in an annoying way, peek in an annoying way for your opponent, strafe side to side, jump shot, crouch. When you fight somebody and you feel like, wow, that person was so hard to hit, like they're just like slippery, try to emulate that or try to work those things into your gameplay. I feel like that's just one of the biggest things that I feel like it not only applies to movement, but just anything in the game. When you have to play against it and it's rough, try to take that and start using it yourself. And I feel like movement is the easiest kind of example of this, because you never really know what you look like when you're fighting, unless you have your friend record fighting you and then watch it back. But when you're fighting an opponent, you see exactly what they're doing, and you know what's hard to deal with and what's easy to deal with. A lot of people, when they're new to shooters, make the mistake of just standing still when they fight, because it's hard for people, especially on controller, to like move, both analog sticks at the same time. But think about it from like the perspective of somebody you're fighting. If you're fighting somebody and they just kind of stand still while they're shooting at you, and they don't move side to side, they don't crouch, they don't jump, they don't use cover effectively, that's super easy to fight, right? You want to be someone that's annoying to fight, and that is basically all movement comes down to. It's just being annoying to fight, understanding angles and understanding cover, and kind of using those things naturally without it really detracting much from a fight. And it's hard to like, for me to tell you something that's just going to make that click right away. A lot of it just comes down to muscle memory and kind of recognizing the situations, like how they're going to play out. So yeah, I think it just really comes down to being annoying, strafing, jumping, crouch spamming. I've talked about crouch spamming a bunch, or in a few different videos, and people ask like, how do you do it? Like, you literally just hit crouch, like sporadically, like whatever your crouch button is, you just hit it. There's not much to explain there. Like the name explains it. One other thing I want to talk about is when you're pushing somebody who is on a corner or does have cover, I like to try to make a large adjustment with my character to throw their aim off. So once again, think about it like you're the person who's behind cover. What would you like the opponent who's pushing you to do? Probably just walk straight at you in a straight line, right? Well, if you're trying to push someone who's behind cover, I typically want to go for like a sprint into like a jump and then a slide. So like you sprint, jump, and then land in a slide. And this, not only will it kind of make your hitbox kind of weird because your character is doing a bunch of things, but you make a large adjustment. If you kind of sprint into a jump, you have a decent amount of momentum. And then when you land in a slide, you're going to carry that momentum forward. And that is the ideal way to push someone who's behind cover, I think. Or like Katana up and then like maybe land into a slide if the situation kind of allows for that. Sometimes you won't be able to use the Katana in that way because it's in a building or the trees are kind of weird sometimes. I think that's super important. Another aspect of movement that can be super helpful is getting multiple angles over the course of a fight. So if you're in like a mid-range fight with somebody, peeking from the same spot over and over again isn't ideal. Once again, flip it. What works against you? What would you rather deal with? Someone who peeks the same exact angle every single time over and over and over again, or someone who's kind of like mixing their angles up and maybe katanaing to a different side and catching different angles? Like, obviously you would rather deal with the person who plays repetitively, right? Like, it's just easier to deal with that. So be annoying to fight. Like, get multiple angles in a fight. If you tag someone several times with a red eye and you don't quite want to push into like a close range fight, you could just katana off to like the left or right and get like a completely different angle and continue to tag them with the red eye. This is also very, very important in team game modes. I feel like one of the biggest things a lot of people struggle with in team game modes, especially players that aren't as confident fighting, are they stand directly on top of their teammates and then they have like the same exact angles as their teammates. Where if you and your teammates kind of spread out a bit, not like a large distance, and like still be close enough to where you can help each other, but if you have different angles than your teammates, it makes it so much more difficult for the opponents to deal with. Not only are they getting shot from multiple directions, so it's like more chaotic, but they might not be able to go to cover and protect themselves from all the angles at once. If you have someone's left side and then you shoot at them and then they kind of strafe out to the right, and then like that exposes them to your teammate, and then your teammate starts shooting them, and then they go back into your angle, it's just a mess to deal with. And this is once again something that's true in every shooter I've ever played. Like, if you and your teammates have different angles on things, it just makes it so much harder to deal with. From the opponent's perspective, like I've said many times during this video, flip it and think about what you would rather play with. If it's a 4v4 situation in squads, all the opponents standing on top of each other just makes it super easy. Like, not only do you see all of them, but the angles that all of them have. Whereas if they're more spread out, like, it just makes everything more chaotic. You have to find all the players. You have to worry about getting shot from different angles. Once you do get shot from different angles, you have to like respond to that. And then another thing that can be super helpful for getting different angles in a fight, whether it's team game modes or solos, is katanaing into trees. I've seen this become more and more common this season, and I've started using it myself a decent amount. I'm sure many of you have seen the tree campers this season. There's been a lot of them, but you can also just, katana into a tree to get a different angle on a fight, and like change the fight up. You know, you tag someone from like under the tree, you katana up to the tree, you start shooting them from there. They don't know how to respond to it. And in team game modes, once again, if your teammate's on the ground somewhere shooting at them and you katana up to a tree and start shooting at the opponents, it's going to make that fight incredibly chaotic for them. So while this isn't, you know, mechanical movement, like I was saying before, there's not much of a mechanical movement skill gap. Just knowing immediately where to put yourself to get advantageous angles to like throw the opponents off and just kind of naturally catching different angles in your teammates can be incredibly helpful, I think. And it puts so much pressure on the opponent, whether it's solos, duos, trios, squads, doesn't matter. And that's what you want to do. The more pressure on your opponent, the more inconvenient it is for your opponent to play against you, the better. And that's at its core everything. As far as like the movement skill gap in Fortnite, I feel like just comes down to making the fight inconvenient for your opponent. But that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys found this helpful and informative. It's more of like a abstract video, I guess would be describe it. You know, it's not as like concrete. It's just like do this thing or don't do this thing. But I think if you start thinking about the game like this and trying to throw some of these aspects into your gameplay, you're going to be much harder to deal with in Fortnite. If you guys did find this helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.